Hello, we're so pleased that you found us. Welcome. Take your seat that we've provided, especially for you, and make yourself comfortable. We've placed some objects that you might find interesting near your chair. All settled? Good. I'll begin to read the first of many books that I've written. This book is entitled The Flower of Freedom, and all rights to the book and to my presentation of it are reserved. Ready? Let's begin. The Flower of Freedom by Deborah Reeves, Chapter 1, Touchdown. Oscar had always thought that the idea of flying on fumes demonstrated a pilot's lack of skill, but after white-knuckling it the last part of the journey over the English Channel, he had a new respect for the concept. Maybe there was a God, he mused as they touched down. He revised that to a certainty that there was a devil when he heard the wing commander bellow as the pregnant girls exited the plane. The pilot was frog-marched into the office while the girls were conducted into the mess hall. "What is the meaning of this?" the old upper school Brit yelled with a spittle flying from his mouth. Desmond wasn't able to make the rendezvous point because the rescue at the chateau stirred up a hornet's nest of Nazis. He's probably lying low. I'll get him on the future flight. Those girls were rescued from the chateau, which had been turned into an Aryan breeding factory. Their parents are dead. They had no place to go, so I decided to bring them to a better place. You decided? You decided. You Canadians are so unmanageable. You have no respect for the chain of command. If I had my way, you'd go straight into the brig for insubordination. This war has demanded that we deal with all of you colonials, much to my distaste. But I am soon to be relieved of your presence and insubordination. You are scheduled to go back to Canada tomorrow. Here are your orders. So take your riffraff with you and deal with them there. They are not staying here. We have been relieving ourselves of the lower types of society by sending them to Canada for more than 100 years. Breeding will out. You ensure that there are seats on the transatlantic flight for them. They are not fit for Britain. I will not countenance following women on my base. For your information, the resistance cell has been decimated. We have no idea where Desmond was taken after his arrest. Nothing that General Pickle up his ass said had impacted Oscar in the least, except for the news that Desmond had been arrested. That worried him. But the best thing he could do was put one foot ahead of another and pray for his old buddy. If anyone could survive, it was Des. Des had nicknamed him Oscar, and it had stuck. Everyone called him that now. He could barely remember that his own name was Bertrand. No matter, he liked Oscar better. He shook his head to clear his thoughts, and he went to the phone to call the guy in charge of the transatlantic flights. He had to argue his case to get the girls aboard. He reported that Desmond had been arrested, so that his seat would be vacant, and the guy on the other end of the phone admitted that there was one more empty seat on the flight after Oscar said that the girls had lived at the chateau and probably had a lot of information from close contact with the SS men. That made them valuable to the resistance and the trainers in Canada at Camp X. The guy told him to bring the girls along on the flight, and he would see what he could do about getting them some papers, but that Oscar would be responsible for them once they landed in Canada. Both those girls looked like they were ready to pop as Oscar conducted them to the plane the following night. The pilot looked at Oscar before he boarded, and he asked to speak with him privately. Walking a few feet away, where they were less likely to be overheard, he said, "What the hell are you thinking, Oscar? We have no medic aboard if they go into labor. What are we going to do if one of them pops over the Atlantic? He continued with a worried expression. Pray? Oscar joked. You think the man upstairs listens to you? Spotted retorted. Probably not, but I bet he listens to those girls. I've had them praying for Des, and they're on it. Listen, Joe, they deserve a break. Canada is a place where they just might get one. And Joe looked at him dead in the eye, and after a heartbeat, he nodded and he yelled out, All aboard! Takeoffs in the dead of night with no running lights are always a harrowing experience, but they lifted off into the air above England, filled with war-weary Canadians who had seen horrors that no one at home could even imagine. The lumbering old cargo plane was full of people from across the wide nation, and it was headed due west to Newfoundland. From there, the two pregnant girls and their new benefactor Oscar would take the connecting flight to Montreal. After the very long flight, where the girls slept fitfully with their heads on one another's shoulders, huddled under the same rough blanket that Oscar had given them the first night, they awoke to their new life. Some passengers had already deboarded by the time the exhausted girls awoke. The first thing that the girls witnessed was a reunion. A young man who had left the plane just ahead of them ran across the tarmac to his waiting wife, who clung to him and stared into his face. The man's mother and father stood and waited with tears running down their faces. Everyone knew that the forces from Newfoundland had been decimated. Whole villages in Newfoundland had not one boy over the age of 14 who remained alive. This little family had beaten the odds, and they were fully aware of the blessing that represented. The girls had no reception party waiting for them, but they had their lives. As long as they had their lives, they had a future.